Thank you, Madam Speaker. As we begin this great debate over what our priorities are, it's worth reflecting on an article that was written nearly 3 years ago in the Sunday Times of London by Nobel Prize-winning economist Joseph Stiglitz and his associate Linda Bilmes. Here's what they write. The Bush administration was wrong about the benefits of the war, talking about the Iraq War, and was wrong about the costs of the war. The President and his advisors expected a quick and expensive conflict. Instead, we have a war that is costing more than anyone could have imagined. The cost of direct U.S. military operations, not even including long-term costs such as taking care of wounded veterans, already exceeds the cost of the 12-year war in Vietnam and is more than double the cost of the Korean War. And even in the best-case scenario, these costs are projected to be almost 10 times the cost of the first Gulf War, almost a third more than the cost of the Vietnam War, and twice that of the First World War. The only war in our history that cost more was the Second World War, when 16.3 million U.S. troops fought in a campaign lasting 4 years at a total cost in 2007 dollars, after adjusting for inflation, of about $5 trillion. They go on to write that with virtually the entire armed forces committed to fighting the Germans and Japanese, the cost per troop in today's dollars was less than $100,000. That's in 2007 dollars. By contrast, the Iraq War is costing upwards of $400,000 per troop. Most Americans have yet to feel these costs. This was written almost 3 years ago. The price in blood has been paid by our voluntary military and by hired contractors. The price in treasure has, in a sense, been financed entirely by borrowing. Taxes have not been raised to pay for it. In fact, taxes on the rich have actually fallen. Deficit spending gives the illusion that the laws of economics can be repealed, that we can have both guns and butter. But, of course, the laws are not repealed. The costs of the war are real, even if they've been deferred, possibly to another generation. That from Joseph Stiglitz and Linda Bilmes almost 3 years ago. One of the biggest costs of our soaring debt, one of the biggest causes of our soaring debt and economic insecurity ends up being Pentagon spending. The budget for the Pentagon consumes more than half our discretionary spending. We've seen countless stories of U.S. taxpayer dollars going unaccounted for in Iraq and Afghanistan. We've had countless high-profile hearings on contractor fraud and the lack of oversight at the Department of Defense. According to the Friends Committee on National Legislation, 39% of our income tax dollars last year went to Pentagon spending on past and current wars. And Stiglitz again has said that the Iraq War didn't just contribute to the severity of the financial crisis, it kept us from responding to it effectively. Increased indebtedness meant the government had far less room to maneuver than it otherwise would have had. So what we have is the U.S. financing war on borrowed money. We must examine our connection between soaring debt and wars, the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan. Between 2003 and 2008, the U.S. debt increased by almost $4 trillion. A quarter of that debt is directly attributed to the war in Iraq. The cost of the war in Afghanistan has been over $455 billion to date, and the deadline for that keeps sliding past 2014. Now, in the nationalpriorities.org, they talk about a sustainable defense. And they say, one report says that there's options for reducing military spending, saving nearly $1 trillion over the next decade, without adversely impacting U.S. national security interests. So we can have a strong defense, but we're spending so much money, we're undermining our ability to be able to provide for the American people here at home. And we have to start taking care of things here at home. What will we sacrifice? Will we sacrifice the education of our children for these wars? Will we sacrifice Social Security for these wars? Will we sacrifice Medicare or Medicaid for these wars? Will we sacrifice our infrastructure for these wars? Or will we say the war in Iraq was based on lies? Let's bring these troops home. Will we say that Afghanistan is a hopeless, corrupt mess and it's time to bring our troops home, and then begin to use the resources of our country, those resources that are hard-earned taxpayer dollars, use that money for things here at home? Let's have that debate as we talk about cutting the budget. Thank you.